Oil experts, nuclear energy experts that I've been speaking to over the past couple of weeks are saying we are headed for troubling times, worse than what we've been hearing about, in fact. And they aren't being alarmist about it. This is their business. This is how they provide for their families. And they are just being realistic about what's happening. America running out of diesel fuel is just the tip of the fuel iceberg. A nuclear uranium expert I interviewed this week said that the United States has got it wrong. And the U.S. and the Western countries are way behind. And that Putin was absolutely right a decade ago while President Obama was asleep at the wheel, because Putin at the time started shoring up his nuclear power production, uranium enrichment, uranium exploration. So they don't have to outsource anything. They do it all in-house, all inside of Russia. We need nuclear power ASAP. Trump put $1.5 billion towards nuclear, and then Biden more than doubled it to close to $5 billion. So Republicans and Democrats right now, they can't agree on anything, but they agree on nuclear. But there's a huge problem that's not going to be solved overnight because it takes time. And the United States has a target of getting to zero carbon electricity production by the year 2035. Well, I'm sorry, guys, there's just no way in hell that they're going to get there by solar and wind. It's just not going to happen. They will absolutely need massive ramping up of nuclear power, and they'll need massive amounts of uranium in order to do that. You see, the West has outsourced all, and I mean all, of its nuclear production, which is backfiring right now. So either the United States buys the enriched uranium from Putin or Kazakhstan, or third option, it steals it, like it's doing in Syria, stealing oil, and now trying to do the same thing in Haiti by attacking the fuel blockades in Port-au-Prince, Haiti. So good luck with that. You know, you can try to steal oil from third world countries. That's one thing. But trying to steal enriched uranium from Putin, that's not going to happen. So Putin yesterday slammed the United States, saying the Western countries and the United States plunder Africa and other countries instead of developing its own productions. They steal from Africa. Watch.
В значительной степени тот уровень благосостояния, который достигнут в бывших колониальных державах, он основан на ограблении Африки.
He's not wrong about it. The United States is literally stealing millions of barrels of oil right now from Syria. He's right. It's a total joke. And it's backfiring right in these globalist faces because they don't have the production at home. And Putin is about to put the nail in the West's coffin with nuclear power. That's right, nuclear power. Did you know that 1 in 5 American homes is powered by nuclear energy? They don't want you to know this because they try to keep it hidden. They also don't want you to know that 50% of that energy comes directly from Russia. That's right, 50% of all nuclear power in the U.S. comes from the enrichment of uranium from Russia. So at a time when we're openly calling for regime change in Russia, we're also massively reliant on that very same regime. So wait a minute. We continue to send weapons to Ukraine to the tune of billions of dollars to attack Russia, but we also rely on them for our energy needs. I mean, this is insane. It only takes a few tons, by the way, of uranium to fuel an entire city, a supply that can be mined in just a few days if we had that production capacity. On top of that, nuclear energy produces zero carbon dioxide emissions. You see where I'm going with this, right? This is the answer. This is why Rick Rule is beating the drums on this and why we'd better pay attention.
That the good news in uranium continues, particularly with the pace of Japanese restarts, but also because of increasing concerns about the supply chain, particularly in view of both inflation and, of course, the war in Ukraine.
He's right. And there's virtually no uranium production in the United States at the moment. Let that sink in for a moment. The United States has the most nuclear reactors in the world and no uranium production. Something big is happening right before our eyes here in 2023, and almost no one is talking about it.
So the stocks that everybody owns are going down, and the stocks that nobody owns, except a few people, are going way up, and they're going up in relative obscurity.
The moves that Chinese President Xi Jinping and Russian President Vladimir Putin are making, which are completely going to alter the international power structure and the monetary system, and the mainstream media is largely ignoring it. The Washington, of course, is asleep at the wheel, dealing with all of the crybaby drama over Kevin McCarthy as Speaker of the House, or they're worried about which NFL team is making the playoffs. But very smart people are paying attention. Very smart multi-million-dollar investors that I've been speaking with know exactly what's coming.
And I think 2023 could end up being one of the weakest years ever for the U.S. dollar.
The new monetary world order under Russian President Putin and Chinese President Xi Jinping. It's unfolding exactly as we're predicting over the past year, with major indicators in the past few hours. So I want to get to all of these new stunning pieces of news right now. But first, this morning, we just had a bomb go off, and we knew that this was coming. And Putin knew that this was coming. You have warmongers Condoleezza Rice and Bob Gates, Robert Gates, just published a brand new article in the Washington Post calling for all-out war against Russia. I love that the Washington Post just gives them a platform to spew this agenda, but it comes directly from the intelligence state. Then the Washington Post publishes it, and this, of course, is the new marching orders for the neoconservatives in Washington. And Democrats, they're all on board with this. The article is called "Time is Not on Ukraine's Side." And it's a direct call to action to send a massive buildup of weapons and forces to fight Russia. Now, remember, Condoleezza Rice is a war criminal whose illegal war in Iraq led to the deaths of millions of people. That's on her resume. And then she's been calling for a war with Russia for over a decade now. Here she is 8 years ago, laying out how Russia is trying to change the unipolar order.
And when great powers start behaving badly, it gets really dangerous. We have now, I think, a very dangerous, perfect storm between a leader who is unreconciled to the post-war, post-Cold War order in Europe, willing to use a combination of economic pressure, military force, intimidation, and surrogates to get his way to try to undo that order.
So Condoleezza Rice has been pushing for a confrontation with Putin for a very long time. Her words should not be taken lightly. We now have a new bloodthirsty Congress with a new Speaker of the House last night, Kevin McCarthy, the guy who literally wears a Ukrainian flag pin and had dinner with Klaus Schwab and promised to fund an endless war in Ukraine last week. So if you don't think for a second that crap is about to hit the fan, then you are not paying attention. Maybe a lot of people are still in their Christmas fog and they're, still drunk or hungover. I don't know, but stuff's about to get serious. Even deeper in this Washington Post piece is the very important paragraph about minerals and precious metals that I want to call your attention to. So if you needed any more evidence that this is a war about power and mineral resources, natural resources, here you go. There are two important paragraphs that I want to point out. So here's what Condoleezza Rice and Bob Gates say. Quote, "For Putin, defeat is not an option. He cannot cede to Ukraine the 4 eastern provinces that he has declared part of Russia. If he cannot be militarily successful this year, he must retain control of positions in eastern and southern Ukraine that provide future jumping-off points for renewed offensives to take the rest of Ukraine's Black Sea coast, control the entire Donbas region, and then move west. 8 years separated Russia's seizure of Crimea and its invasion nearly a year ago. Count on Putin to be patient to achieve his destiny," they write. So she knows Russia can't lose. And here's the important section that she mentions briefly. Quote, "Meanwhile, although Ukraine's response to the invasion has been heroic and its military has performed brilliantly, the country's economy is in shambles, millions of its people have fled, its infrastructure is being destroyed, and much of its mineral wealth, industrial capacity, and considerable agriculture land are under Russia's control." Forget the agriculture piece of this. It's the mineral wealth. It might be the most important part of this entire article. She sneaks it in quickly. Lithium, gold, iron ore, uranium, all under Putin's control. That's what this is all about. So her solution? Quote, "The only way to avoid such a scenario is for the United States and its allies to urgently provide Ukraine with a dramatic increase in military supplies and capability, sufficient to deter a renewed Russian offensive and to enable Ukraine to push back Russian forces in the east and the south." Oh, okay. So as she says, the only way for this to end is for the United States to dramatically ramp up the war and push Russian forces out of eastern Ukraine and back into mainland Russia. Okay, easy peasy, lemon squeezy, right? Nothing to see here. Ukraine's army has been destroyed. So the people that would be doing this fighting are NATO forces, i.e. American forces, UK forces, French forces. So in other words, the United States doesn't have the mineral resources to compete any longer, and the only way to compete globally is to go to war with Russia over these resources in eastern Ukraine. The United States has 0 lithium mines in the United States, no uranium drilling in the United States for nuclear, nothing